All right, hello class. We're sort of transitioning now. The first few weeks have been about moral theory, ethical theory, how to make moral decisions consistently. So the utilitarian says to make moral decisions consistently, you should use the principle of utility, consequences, human happiness, and flourishing. The deontologist says if you want to make moral decisions consistently, you should use the categorical imperative, moral principle, right? Human reason, good intentions. Virtue theory suggests that you can know what to do. The principle of utility or the categorical imperative might tell you what you should do intellectually, but you might not be the kind of person equipped to actually do that. You can know the right thing to do and simply not do it. And that what morality demands is that you become a particular kind of person. You develop the kind of character that enables you to do the right things, to be honest, loving, kind, generous, just, and whatnot. And so virtue ethics didn't give you a rule to follow, but instead a way of cultivating character, developing virtue, consistent and reliable dispositions to behave in certain ways. So we've been doing theory. We're going to now move into applied ethics for the last few weeks. And so we're going to say, how might these moral theories be applied to a couple of situations, a couple of topics? The first is wealth and distribution. We're going to look at this first societally. What is the most just, most moral way for a society to distribute its resources? And this is very relevant given the current climate of our country, trying to figure out, do we tax the rich to help pay for certain programs, whether it's health care or food stamps or other things? Or do we suggest that's not the government's role, and in fact we should rely more on charity, individuals contributing of their own free will rather than through taxation? So we're going to be asking some of these questions and looking at a few different answers. And these moral theories that we've been covering will play a significant role, right? So before we begin, there's a couple of terms that we need to be clear about. Issues of rights will come up, especially in this particular section on wealth and distribution, but they come up in many different moral issues. And so there's typically in the United States and in the West, right, two types of rights. Generally, we call them negative rights and positive rights. Those words can be rather deceiving. Negative rights do not mean like pessimistic rights or bad rights. And positive rights do not mean like upbeat rights or the rights that we should really like or something. That's not what they mean. So this is important, right? Negative rights are rights of non-interference. That means that we have them as long as nobody interferes with us, right? So free speech, that's a negative right. I have the right to free speech so long as no one threatens me, hurts me, puts me in jail for what I say, right? It's a right of non-interference. The right to bear arms, the negative right, okay? I have it as long as no one comes in and tells me I can't have guns or passes a law telling me. So as long as the government and my neighbors don't interfere, I have it. A right to privacy, this is a negative right. I have privacy so long as no one violates it. As long as no one interferes with my privacy, I've got the right. So negative rights are rights of non-interference. And this will become even more clear when we talk about positive rights. Positive rights demand that something, goods, services, something tangible, be provided to those who have these rights. These are not simply rights of non-interference, but in fact, these are rights where something has to be given. So in our country, education is a right. From kindergarten through 12th grade, we say that you have the right to equal education. But this is a positive right because if we say this as a country, as a society, we've got to provide schools, free of charge, teachers, transportation, all these things. Something is being provided, and it's not free, obviously, that's through taxes, but it's not simply a right of non-interference. This is a right where we say, if you have it, we're going to provide you with something, right? When you get arrested and the police say you have a right to an attorney, this is a positive right. If you can't afford one, one will be provided to you, right? Something's given to you, something tangible, a service. That makes it a positive right. So you've got negative rights and positive rights. If the right to bear arms were a positive right, it would mean that the government would actually have to provide a gun to you, right? But that's not what we mean when we say you have the right to bear arms. What we mean is a negative right. I have it as long as the government doesn't interfere in my personal business, okay? Popular positive rights are things like education, where some argue that health care should be a right of every citizen. This would be a positive right. Something would have to be provided, okay? Hopefully, this helps. We often talk about the right to marry, the right to marriage. This is a negative right, okay? I'm free to marry who I want so long as no one interferes, passes a law, or tells me I can't with threat of force, right? If marriage were a positive right, it means the government would have to provide you with a spouse or something, and that's not what we mean by that. Okay, anytime you talk about a right, if you have a right, someone else has a duty or an obligation, and it's always this way. Rights imply duties. You have to know this, okay? It's important. So if I say I have a right to free speech, that means someone has a duty. In this case, everyone has the duty. If I have the right to free speech, everyone has the duty, and the duty is don't interfere with my free speech. That's to the government, that's to my neighbor, that's to my church, right? And so there's a right, which means other people have a duty. Negative rights almost always imply universal duties of non-interference, okay? Positive rights, if I have the right to be educated, K through 12, someone has an obligation or a duty. And typically with positive rights, the duty falls on the government. Someone has to provide me with an attorney. Someone has to provide me with education or an opportunity to be educated. If I've got a right to it, the duty falls typically, again, on the state, local, or federal government. Rights imply duties. So this is going to come up as we move forward throughout. So let's move into wealth and distribution. This information is old, as you can see. They update it periodically. I haven't gone on for a while. But as of October 2010, this is Bill Gates' net worth, $54 billion. Now, this is in no way intended, what I'm about to talk about, to smear Bill Gates or to make him seem like a bad guy. By all accounts, he is a wonderful philanthropist, does tons of work in Africa and with charity. The Bill Gates Foundation, or the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, is like awesome, from what I've heard anyway. This is not an attack, but he's a famous person. He's often associated with the super rich, and so we're going to talk about this, right? We're going to raise this issue of wealth and distribution in our country. So Bill Gates is worth $54 billion. Again, this is a rough estimate, although there is a website that simply tracks his wealth, his net worth. But this is primarily based on Microsoft, what are their shares worth, and how many shares does Bill Gates have. It doesn't factor in a lot of his assets and other things at this point. Okay, it's mostly Microsoft stock. So, on this website that tracks his wealth, it gives you some fun statistics. So Microsoft went public on March 13th, 1986. Since that time, Bill Gates has made approximately $71 every second from 1986 till today. Every second, he's made $71, right, to get to $54 billion. That means he's made $284 every 4 seconds. And the reason the website has the 4-second increment is because that's approximately how much time it takes to bend down and pick up money that you've dropped on the ground. So if he drops a $20 bill on the ground, it's a waste of his time to bend down and pick it up because he's already made $284, right? I mean, he's practically a human. He could be a human ATM machine since 1986. You know, he's made $4,280 every minute since 1986 to get to $54 billion. $256,000 every hour. Like by the time you get done with this lecture, he'll have made probably half that, right? $6 million every day since 1986, $43 million a week, $187 million a month, $2,250,000 per year, approximately, every year since 1986. This is incomprehensible. It boggles the mind to think about this much money, right, in comparison to what the normal person makes or has. Now, we compare this with poverty rates from 2005. There was a census taken in 2005. Again, these things have changed and, in fact, have probably gotten worse since the recession. But in 2005, there were 37 million people in poverty, 12.6% of the population. This includes 7.7 million families. And then we've got some rates. The poverty rate for a single person in 2005 was basically $10,000 per year. This changes state to state, so it might be slightly higher in Hawaii where things cost more, lower in Alabama, but on average across the 50 states, the poverty rate for a single person was $10,000. That means if you make more than $10,000 a year, you're not in poverty and you're not one of the 37 million. But $10,000 a year is not much. That's my rent for a year. And I live in Idaho, not like California or New York. So you can see that there's a lot of people making not very much money. For a family of two, the poverty rate in 2005 was about $13,000. For a family of three, $16,000. For a family of four, $20,000. 37 million people in poverty. Now, some fun math. If you multiply 20,000, which is the poverty rate for a family of four, if you multiply $20,000 by 2 million, it still doesn't equal Bill Gates' net worth. So if you took $20,000 times it by 2 million, you don't get Bill Gates. That represents families of four, so that actually represents 8 million people. Bill Gates earns more than 8 million citizens, right? Combined. 8 million people. And so the question to be asked ethically is this just? Do we distribute our resources justly, morally? We live in a hybrid economic system. It's capitalistic, but it also has some socialist kind of principles involved, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, disability, food stamps, other programs. So it's capitalist, but it's also supplemented with, right, sort of a moderate kind of redistribution through taxation. And yet, with those sort of policies in place, it still allows for the extremely wealthy and the extremely poor. That, 2% owns like 88% of the total wealth. 2% of the American population owns 88% of the total wealth. The other, right, 98% fights over the last 12%, things like that. I mean, you have these statistics that boggle the mind. Is this moral? Is this fair? Does anyone really earn $54 billion? Now, granted, no one argues Bill Gates, a genius, creates jobs, stimulates the economy. There's so many positive things you can say. But does that mean he's actually worth as much as 8 million other individuals combined? And so some of these questions have to be asked, and hopefully you're, right, thinking about such things. Poverty rates by race, which might become important as we go on. 88.3% of the Caucasians were in the poverty in 2005, or below the poverty line. 25% of African Americans and 22% of Hispanics. Now, you can see that by race this is pretty significant in terms of percentages, and that raises other issues. Why? What is it about certain populations that makes them much more likely to be in poverty than others? And that's not an easy question to answer. You could say something like, well, certain ethnic groups are just prone to making bad economic decisions, like they're not as good with money. But that tends to be racist, right? That certain groups just in nature of their race are worse at making decisions. I don't want to make that claim. I don't know very many people that want to make that claim, right? What's the alternative, though? The alternative is something like the social situation in our country creates situations such that certain minorities are more likely to end up in poverty. And that means if it's a social structure or social structures that create that, then maybe there's a lot of injustice going on economically when certain minority groups are immediately at a disadvantage. And so this is something to consider. So the first article that you read is from John Hospers. This is my strategy in this week, this section. I'm having you read two different people that are on two extremes, okay? John Hospers is a libertarian. So he's about as far right as you can get. He was the first person to run for president on the libertarian ticket. What you read was an excerpt from his paper, The Libertarian Manifesto. So he's outlining sort of like the libertarian core principles of this political group, this political party. So he's about as far right as you can get. The other author you're going to read is Kai Nielsen. He's a socialist, an egalitarian. He's far on the left side when it comes to the economy. I don't expect you to agree with either of these figures fully, although you might. My guess is you'll have some disagreements. But what will happen is you'll say to yourself, that argument is stronger to me than that one, right? And then it can identify you where you are economically, at least. Because in our country, Republicans are like tempered libertarians. They're closer to the libertarian than they are to the socialist, but they don't go all the way with the libertarian, right? If it was a sliding scale, libertarians would be way over here. Then you'd have Republicans. Then you'd have Democrats. Democrats don't go all the way to where the egalitarians are. They're not that far left, but they're certainly closer to the egalitarians than they are to the libertarian. So it would go libertarian, as we move from right to left, libertarian, Republican, Democrat, egalitarian. So I'm giving you the extremes that you might find yourself somewhere on that continuum in terms of the argument. How should wealth be distributed? So Hospers is a libertarian. And he argues, yes, there is a problem with wealth and distribution in this country, right? There is a problem. He looks at Bill Gates. He looks at the poverty rates. And he says, yes, there's a problem. And I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is the government is too big. As far as libertarians are concerned, the only rights that a person should have are negative rights. There should be no positive rights. So things like freedom of speech, freedom of life, freedom of liberty, freedom of property should all be protected. But things like education, healthcare, welfare, Social Security, these are all positive rights. Something has to be provided to you. And the libertarian immediately says these things are wrong, right? Rights of non-interference are good. Rights of non-interference lead to a small government that doesn't interfere in our lives and that gives us maximum freedom. The libertarian liberty, freedom is their mantra. I'm free as long as nobody interferes with my life and what I'm doing. But one of my negative rights is my right to property. My land, my income, what I work for, my wages are mine, and no one should interfere with them. No one should take what is rightfully mine. So the libertarian says only negative rights should be defended. That means we need a police force so that the police can protect my property from people that might steal it, protect my right to life from people that might kill me, right? And we need a military to protect us from other countries that might take our property or other countries that might take our life or our speech. But other than that, the government should be very limited, okay? We should not be taxed. The immorality in our economic system is not that there's a gap between rich and poor, according to Hospers. The immorality in our economic system is the fact that the government gets involved and taxes us. Why? Because taxation is stealing. The definition of stealing for Hospers: to take something without permission with threat of force. Using force or threat of force. So let me say that again. Stealing is taking something that is not yours without permission, using force or the threat of force. That's theft. What is taxation? It's the very definition of stealing. The government is going to take something that is not theirs without their permission, using force or the threat of force. I don't have a say whether I want to pay my taxes or not. I don't have a say whether I want to support the war in Iraq with my taxes or abortion or whatever else might be the case. I pay my taxes and the government redistributes it as they see fit. If I don't, the IRS comes knocking on my door. That's the threat of force, and if I don't pay, they'll send me to jail and use actual force. That is stealing. They're taking what is not theirs without their permission, using force or the threat of force. For Hospers, that's immoral. On principle, it is absolutely immoral every time it happens. So, as a result, Hosper says, the government's job is not to make sure that things are fair or that things are equal. The government is here to make sure that humans are free. That's what we should be legislating, freedom. We should be protecting negative rights. And if humans are free, then they are responsible for their own lives, to find work, to make their money, to do whatever, and the government has no right to that. And so he acknowledges, you know what? If we lived in a libertarian society, the gap between the rich and poor would probably grow greater, right? There'd be people that, without the limitations and regulations of government, the rich might get richer and the poor might get poorer. But it's only because the rich are hardworking and inventive and are willing to risk and invest. And the poor are lazy and they don't do what they should do. And because of that, they should not be supported by the government using my money or your money, right? Even if we might be able to close the gap through taxation, on principle it's stealing, so it's wrong and we shouldn't do it. It's immoral, right? So Hospers focuses on negative rights. If you look at the questions on the PowerPoint here, I want to answer them. We have a right to property, and it's a negative right, meaning no one should interfere with our land and our wages. The role of government is very limited. It's only to protect negative rights. Life, liberty, property, speech, that's the government's role. Some libertarians argue we might need to tax a little bit only to pay for police and for the military. That's it, because they're the defenders of our negative rights. However, Hospers and other extreme libertarians say we shouldn't even tax for that. We should have a privatized police force so that various communities would look at private police forces. They would take bids. How much will it take for you to patrol our neighborhood and ensure our negative rights? And that community would pitch in voluntarily to pay for police force. Same with the military. The military would have to ask for charity, ask for money. And the argument is, if we weren't taxed so heavily, we'd have enough money to give to these things to protect our negative rights. So the role of government is very limited. Do rich have an obligation to help the poor? No. There is no obligation for the rich to help the poor. And that's why it should not be taxed. It should not be forced. Instead, the rich, if they choose, those that have means, or the poor, can choose to give through charity. It should not be something that's expected. It should not be something that's forced. It should be something that comes willingly from the person, from the company, from the corporation, to say, out of charity, we'll help people with their retirement. We'll help people with their medical bills, and we'll help people here and there. But it's not something that's done against my will, but only through charity. To help highlight this, Hospers actually gives an island analogy. He talks about the idea of there being an island with two people, person A and person B. The only two people on the island. They divide the island in half. Person A works hard, plants seeds, grows vegetables and fruit. And when the monsoon months come, person A has harvested and has enough food to survive the winter. Person B, during the summer, drank coconut juice, laid around on the beach, hung out, and when the monsoon months came, he didn't have enough food. Person B goes to person A and says, you have more than you need. I'm going to starve. You are obligated to help me. Give me some of your food. And Hosper says, person A has no obligation to help person B whatsoever. And person B has no right. This is the key. If person B has a right to some of person A's stuff, then person A has a duty or an obligation to help. But person B does not have a right to person A's food, so person A does not have a duty or an obligation to help. However, Hosper says, if person A, out of the goodness of his heart, wants out of charity to give food to person B, great. What a wonderful, kind-hearted person. But it is not a right, and there is no obligation. Okay? And that's sort of his island analogy. And he says, isn't this the way we think of it? I shouldn't be obligated to help other people, right? Through the theft of the government, through their proposed Robin Hooding of my money, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. So a few questions arise. I mean, there might be a lot of questions that you have, but for now, a few questions arise. And my main one is, what argument is Hospers making? Is it a utilitarian argument? Is it a deontological argument? Is it a virtue argument? Right? So I want you to think about that. Where do you think Hospers is coming from in this way? What kind of logic, morally speaking, is he implementing? His primary argument is deontological. Okay? So remember, the categorical imperative asks us, can I will that everyone do what I'm thinking about doing? If the answer is yes, then I'm allowed to do it. If the answer is no, then I'm not allowed to do it either. And so Hosper says, can we will that everyone steal, take something that isn't theirs with force or the threat of force? The answer clearly is no. Stealing cannot be universalized under the categorical imperative. Then the government can't do it either. Doesn't matter how good their intentions are. Doesn't matter how good the consequences are that they're trying to promote, helping the elderly, helping the poor, providing health care. It doesn't matter because we're not interested in consequences. It's the principle that stealing is always wrong. So don't try to justify stealing with your good consequences. If we can't universalize it, then the government can't do it either. Hospers also argues that taxation for certain government programs uses the wealthy as a means to an end. So it violates the second formulation of the categorical imperative, right? We want to have health care. The only way we can pay for it is to tax. Who are we going to raise taxes on? The rich. The rich now are used as a means to some social end like universal health care, or schooling, or affordable universities, federal grants to help pay for college, Medicare, or Social Security for the elderly. We're going to create these programs, tax people, using them as a means to an end to pay for our programs. And he says using people as a means to an end is always wrong. I have a few quotes that I want you to highlight that might help you as you write your papers. In the handout that you have on John Hospers, on the first page, page 23, you see a few bullet points on the left margin there. Bullet point number 2. Other men's lives are not yours to dispose of. And this is other men's lives should not be used as a means to your end. That's his argument here. I enjoy seeing operas, but operas are expensive to produce. Opera lovers often say the state should subsidize opera so that we can all see it, even the poor. Also, it would be for the people's betterment, cultural benefit, education, etc. But what they are advocating is nothing more than legalized plunder. They can't pay for the productions themselves, and yet they want to see opera, which involves a large number of people in their labor. So what they are saying in effect is get the money through legalized force. Take a bit more out of every worker's paycheck every week to pay for operas we want to see. But other men's lives and their money and their property is not yours to dispose of. Don't use it as a means to your end, in this case, operas. Jump down the page there, and this is the second quote on the PowerPoint. 100 men might gain great pleasure from beating up or killing just one insignificant human being. That's the utilitarian logic, right? 100 people gain great pleasure from taxing one rich person, from hurting or killing one rich person. But he's not a utilitarian, right? But other men's lives are not yours to dispose of, highlighting his deontological commitment. In order to achieve the worthy goals of the next 5-year plan, this is the government talking now, right? In order to achieve the worthy goals of the next 5-year plan, we must forcibly collectivize the peasants. But other men's lives are not yours to dispose of. Don't use me as a means to an end. Do you want to occupy rent-free the mansion that another man has worked for 20 years to buy? But other men's lives are not yours to dispose of. Do you want operas so badly that everyone is forced to work harder to pay for their subsidization through taxes? But other men's lives are not yours to dispose of. Do you want to have free medical care at the expense of other people, whether they wish to provide it or not? But other men's lives are not yours to dispose of. Deontological, deontological, deontological. At the very end of the paper, the article, Hospers makes a utilitarian argument. And this is fine, right? In you're making an argument, you have this primary justification, deontology, and then he's got this secondary argument, which is utilitarian. It's not as important, it's not make or break, but it's helpful. And basically, Hospers says on 31, on the right-hand column, people will cry if libertarians have their way. The poor will starve. People will get medical attention. Things will, the gap between rich and poor will get so great. And Hosper says, the libertarian argues this is exactly what would not happen. Once the government stopped regulating business, once they took their hands out of every single pot that they're in, once they removed, the economy would flourish as never before. There'd be more money to spread around. The poor would be better off, and things would actually flourish. The country and the economy would actually flourish. And so in the end, he says we need to follow these principles of deontology, but he thinks that they actually would benefit things overall, giving kind of this rule utilitarian argument at the very end. So this is Hospers. This is his argument for a moral way of distributing wealth. It's vital that you hear what he's saying, right? He's suggesting that we don't worry so much about maximizing outcomes as much as upholding certain principles of morality. Make sure your citizens are free. That's the government's role. What citizens do with their freedom is up to them. We shouldn't babysit, right? That's the basic tone and tenor here. I hope this helps. If you have any questions at all, let me know, and I will see you online.